Been talking about sweatshops and the movement for municipalities and educational institutions to buy products from sweat-free organizations, companies that don't mistreat their employees, and keep in mind labor conditions for those employees. And with us is Colin O'Malley. He's organizing director for Metro Justice, and there's a big push in New York State to keep in mind the conditions of workers everywhere. Who among us is doing well, is doing right in this movement?
Sure. Well, you know, there's been a movement among colleges and universities for about 10 years now, really pushed by United Students Against Sweatshops initially, where they formed the Worker Rights Consortium, which is an organization that goes and investigates factories that are licensing and producing collegiate apparel.
Which is so popular, right?
Yeah, absolutely, right?
You live in the sweatpants and you live in those shirts and the hats and all of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, and those are multi-billion-dollar industries. There's a lot of profit being made both on the collegiate side and on the company, Nike's, Adidas, sort of the brands we recognize. But universities have signed on in, I think, about 250 now are affiliates with the Worker Rights Consortium, saying that, and they've put together codes of conduct saying these are the kind of labor standards we expect if you make our apparel. And when Nike or Adidas or anyone else is found to not be doing that, those institutions pressure them to change their behavior. So, for instance, right now with Adidas, there's a factory in Indonesia, PT Kizon, which spontaneously laid off 2,800 workers and owes them millions of dollars in severance. A number of brands, Nike in particular, helped to pay back the severance wages of those workers. Adidas has refused. So, Cornell, Oberlin, University of Washington, a number of universities have cut their contracts until Adidas agrees to pay those severance wages.
So when it hurts the company's bottom line, then they listen. Let me ask you this. Absolutely. There are some people who would say, look, there are so many people out of work in this country. Why should we be concerned about the conditions of workers in other countries?
Outsourcing and sweatshop labor are two sides of the same coin. When labor standards are allowed to just continually decline in other countries, you will see outsourcing away from the United States. So much of our auto parts manufacturing has now moved out of the country. So much, I mean, we used to have an apparel industry, and we still do. There's a couple of places that still produce apparel, but they're few and far between at this point. Luckily in Rochester, Hickey Freeman.
Right. When my mother first moved to this country, she worked in a factory that made shoes.
Sure.
In Lawrence, Massachusetts. And she remembers that. But I say, who makes shoes in the United States now? I don't know.
Yeah, well, and that's an industry that's largely gone away for access to cheaper wages and lower benefits and no job security and no right to unionization, and that's all led to massive profits for Nike. I don't think it's benefited our communities or the communities of in Indonesia and China and India where those goods are produced.
So what happens over there affects us here in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely. I mean, we live in an interconnected global economy. Every piece of that impacts us here just as much as it impacts them there.
Fascinating discussion. I'm fascinated, and this is something that I'm just learning about, of course, and maybe you are too. If you're interested in learning more about this, please go to the two websites that you see there, usas.org, United Students Against Sweatshops, and then www.sweatfree.org. Colin, thank you so very much for helping frame this discussion in a way that certainly makes sense and certainly gets you thinking.
Great.
It really does. Thank you so much. We hope you enjoyed this week's edition of Many Voices, Many Visions. We'll see you next week right here. Have a great day.